alaikum and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us today for a very important seminar on the state of zoos in Pakistan. Okay, so when we talk about the history of zoos, perhaps the earliest example comes from the monotheistic religions, and that is Noah's Ark, or as it's known in Pakistan, Hazrat Nuh ki Kashti, in which it was ordained by God that Noah when a flood was coming, and it was ordained that Noah take his family and a male and a female species from each of the animal species, and go onto the boat so that they could be protected from the storm that was rising. Practically speaking, something that we've got evidence of, that's the Hierakonpolis in Egypt, about 3500 BC. So we know about the pyramids in Egypt and the pharaohs, and in the early 2000s they realized that when the pharaohs were being buried, they took with them, they sacrificed leopards and other large animals to go with them into the grave. And there's been evidence found in that regard. So this is perhaps considered perhaps the earliest example of zoo anywhere in the world. So about 330 BC, Alexander the Great, he came all the way up to Jhelum, which is about 100 kilometers from here, and he was what he used to do, and he was a student of Aristotle. So what he used to do was to send the animals he found in the areas that he had just conquered back to Greece, and there they formed some of the earlier examples of the zoos. Tower of London in the 13th century. Here, the British king, the English king rather, collected large cats, and in order to show his guests, they were put up in cages, and they were not open to the public till the 16th or the 17th century, but for his own entertainment, the animals were kept in the Tower of London. In France, in Vincennes, a menagerie, which is essentially a collection of animals that are housed there, that came about in 1664. The aristocrats at the time used to take those animals and have them fight each other for entertainment purposes. That ended after the French Revolution. In Vienna, perhaps the first modern zoo, the Tiergarten Schönbrunn. Here you can see, this is a depiction of that, where people were able to come in from the public and witness the animals and look at them. In 1906, an African elephant gave birth, which was the first instance of such thing happening in this particular zoo. So this is when the modern zoos are coming into the picture, not anymore meant for entertainment for the aristocrats and the rich, but for the public at large as well. The London Zoo in 1826, the Barakpur Menagerie, which was located next to Calcutta in South Asia, was perhaps is the first collection of animals that was done by the British, and they also researched them and conducted studies on them. In our own area, Lahore, in Pakistan, was formed in 1872. So there's a long history of having zoos in this country. One would think that having had zoos and animals in our custody for such a long period of time, we would have learned to take care of them in a way that is more sustainable and humane, but that really hasn't happened, as can be seen from article after article. If you go to Google News, this is from 2007. The headline reads, "Stray dogs kill 28 peacocks in Lahore Zoo." So if it's a well-guarded zoo, you've got important and expensive species there. Dogs shouldn't be allowed to come in that way, but this happened. And this makes for a very sad depiction of what is happening. Karachi Zoo, newborn lion cubs, Karachi Zoo again, Puma Cup, and this isn't just about Karachi. It's the examples that I found, but virtually all across Pakistan, same thing is happening. Either we import an animal, it's not being kept in the way that it's supposed to, and it dies. It's not being fed properly. It's being given the wrong medicine. It's being caged improperly. This results in death and devastation. This is an example of Islamabad. We've got Dr. Tar with us, and he'll talk more about the Islamabad Zoo. But regardless of whatever is happening, because zoos are a source of entertainment for the masses in Pakistan, it's something that anyone with even the most meager resources can visit. You will see people flocking to the zoos and oblivious to whatever is happening behind the cages. And there are definite capacity gaps, technical capacity, human capacity, that's of concern. And this is the case that we'll talk about in a little bit more detail, whereby the Islamabad High Court came and said that the Islamabad Zoo's management should now be perhaps given to the Ministry of Climate Change and Islamabad Wildlife Board, because the current administration isn't able to take care of the animals properly. So, why are we talking about zoos? Essentially, we're at a time when environmental degradation is happening at a really fast pace. Environmental degradation means, we are polluting our river bodies and we're polluting our land, and the animal species has been greatly dependent on that. But unfortunately, due to our activities, it has resulted in their demise, and we're at risk for a large species extinction. Overpopulation is happening. We are encroaching upon land that used to belong to the animals. And then there's climate change. You've got heat waves, floods, droughts, and just as they impact humans, they also have a devastating impact on the wildlife. So what's the purpose of zoos? The zoos can come in and perhaps serve as a sanctuary of sorts for animals, where we could do research, educate our kids about the necessity of having biodiversity amongst our midst. But that's not happening. So as I was showing you in the previous slides, we've got, we should have taken, it used to be that the animals were used for entertainment purposes, but now worldwide, the first and the key goal is education and research. But in Pakistan, it's only entertainment. And this is an interesting graphic which shows the evolution of zoos across the world, whereby you've gone from a menagerie, which is essentially a bunch of animals that are being caged, to a zoological park where you study the habitats of animals, to a conservation center, an environmental resource center, where you look at the whole ecosystem and you discuss the survival of species and how they matter to us. Anybody guess where we are at right now? This is the 19th century, or even before. This is where we are at. We haven't moved even into the 20th century. This is, having visited Pakistani zoos in recent days, I am aghast at where we are at. This is where we are at in the 19th century. Another question mark, and there are so many things to discuss, but in order to keep it brief, private zoos have come up in Pakistan as well. Huge question mark. I mean, who's allowing them? It's very easy to get animals in. There is a major party in Pakistan that has the lion as its symbol, and in their rallies and demonstrations, they bring that lion out, or one of the lions that is in the country out. I mean, that's animal cruelty, but there are no checks and balances. And it's an ethical issue, right? It's an issue that calls into question our own humanity. So where to next? A lot of people And as I was talking to Dr. Ijaz a couple of days back, and I asked him about his position, having worked in the WWF, and he said, well, WWF position ideally would be to do away with the zoos because of they belong in the wild, but due to conservation issues and our need to enhance the biodiversity and do research, perhaps we should move towards having zoos, but not in the way that they are in Pakistan. I talked about capacity issues, technical and financial. Perhaps we need to move towards indigenous species that are kept here, rather than bringing in large cats and elephants from outside. Accreditation of zoos is a major issue. Perhaps Katie will talk about it. None of the zoos in Pakistan can probably be accredited by the major agency that looks after the zoos worldwide. And then I'll ask Dr. Ijaz to perhaps talk about the Convention on Biodiversity, CITES perhaps, to see what we are doing wrong vis-a-vis some of these international conventions that Pakistan is signatory to. We don't think about the larger conventions and treaties vis-a-vis zoo because it's considered to be outside the domain, but they're definitely linked. So with that, I'm going to request Katie to talk about her experience in the US. And before that, let me just quickly give you a brief bio on Katie, who after completing her undergraduate degree and following her passion for animals and conservation, started working as a zookeeper at the St. Louis Zoological Park in the United States. After 5 years, she moved to Pakistan and soon found an opportunity to continue her wildlife-related work with Comsat's University. Currently, she is focused on a snow leopard population study that is based in Skardu. We really appreciate Katie for taking the time and look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. And thank you all for coming to what's been already touted as a very pertinent talk of the state of zoos in Pakistan. Okay. Thanks. Thank you. Okay, so as you said, my name is Katie Cipro, and I'm here to basically give you a kind of perspective of zoos in America, and I'm going to do that through my time as a zookeeper at the St. Louis Zoo, and give you a general overview of how the St. Louis Zoo operates and how it got there and how it stays there. And then finally we'll end off with just a little brief, what can be done in Pakistan? What's the potential? So, as has been established already, I was a zookeeper. I was a zookeeper for 5 years at the Children's Zoo, which is inside the St. Louis Zoo in St. Louis, Missouri, in the United States. That's in the Midwest of... Used to talking louder anyway. So, it's basically in the Midwest of the United States. And, okay, so while I was there, I studied the behaviors of over 300 individual animals, and these ranged dozens of species, from porcupines, parrots, to pot-bellied pigs, and to the less alliterative frogs, a sloth, a little dog, alpaca, and an aardvark. So all of these animals I took care of, and they were all found within the Children's Zoo at the St. Louis Zoo. Now, because of the improved comprehension of animals today, an essential part of being a zookeeper is understanding the natural histories and being able to empathize with the animals that you are taking care of. Additionally, then you have to try and get that understanding to the public. So one of the ways that we did this at the Children's Zoo was through animal contacts. So employees are trained in the proper animal handling techniques, which emphasize the safety and well-being of both the animal and the handler. I, in fact, was an animal handler trainer, meaning I trained the people how to hold animals. But I did do more than training people. I actually trained some animals as well. I trained a goat, Lofo. This is my little guy here. I saw him be born. He was born my first summer at the St. Louis Zoo, so he has a special place in my heart. And this is Miles the crow, and Sterling the silvery-cheeked hornbill, all of which I personally had a hand in training. So we train with positive reinforcement at the St. Louis Zoo, which basically is exactly what it sounds. If they do something you like, you reinforce them positively. There is no punishment. So because the well-being of animals is the top priority at the St. Louis Zoo, the majority of a keeper's time is spent ensuring that each animal has the requirements that it needs to live. So socially, mentally, physically, everything. So we obviously clean, we feed, but keepers are equally responsible for the health of all the animals that they're caring for. So every morning and throughout the day, keepers will visually check on animals and make sure to record anything and everything. So behaviors, observations, medications, moves, weights, everything is recorded. And something that may be less obvious as a responsibility of a zookeeper is ensuring the mental stimulation of the animals. And we do this through enrichment. So enrichment is something that's novel for that animal. It can be a new smell, a new thing to look at, just anything. It's so easy to do enrichment. It can be anything that's relatively new to that animal that they don't get every day. And these items help the animals to perform natural behaviors, and it encourages physical activity and that mental stimulation that I was talking about earlier. So we like to be a little themed when it's a particular holiday. So this was around Halloween time with our meerkats. We have a jack-o'-lantern for them that they can crawl in, chew on, scratch at. And this is one of our pythons. This is Bud. He's a baby here, and he's just hiding in leaves that he would do naturally in the wild. And finally, this is Rocky, our barn owl, and he is not really sure what to do with the thing in front of him, but basically he tore it apart. So that's enrichment. And overall, zookeepers are a highly trained individuals, ideally, and they are extremely passionate about what they're doing. And at least in the States, there are professional development opportunities abound. I was just a zookeeper for 5 years, and I was able to go on 3 different trainings and workshops across the United States. And each one of those aided in my abilities to improve the animal welfare through training, enrichment, and quality husbandry. So this was my time at the Children's Zoo. So let's talk a little bit about the zoo in general. So the zoo, in 1910, the Zoological Society was formed. And this society was basically the first step in the founding of the zoo in 1913. And slowly, the collection grew slowly. In 1926, there was only 1,178 animals, whereas today, the St. Louis Zoo has a collection of approximately 17,000 animals of over 500 species. I do want to give a little disclaimer though. Some of those several thousands are leafcutter ants, and the critically endangered Missouri Ozark hellbender, which is a kind of salamander that the St. Louis Zoo is actually the only organization that has had success breeding, and even that has been relatively recently, but it's going very well. There's thousands of them at St. Louis Zoo now. So I'd also like to point out that we didn't start with 17,000 animals. So you have to make sure that a zoo understands what every species requires and is able to acknowledge if they have the capacity for caring for that animal. I think perhaps what has helped the St. Louis Zoo be so successful is its mission has not changed very much at all in the 100+ years it's been an organization. So it's always been focused on maintaining a cooperative relationship with the city of St. Louis and the general population, animal welfare, research, education, and conservation. So here you can see this is the current mission statement. I'll go ahead and read it. To conserve animals and their habitats through animal management, research, recreation, and educational programs that encourage the support and enrich the experience of the public. So I'm going to take the opportunity to go into each of these in a little bit more detail. So first is animal management. And this is the responsibility of the animal division and the zookeepers. Basically involves everything that I've talked about just previously. And here we see this is one of our top vets, Louis Padilla. He is actually moved up in the zoo world now. And this is one of my friends, Shannon. She's training some ruffed lemurs. And another friend of mine who is working on making sure that a newly born, I believe that's a Speaks gazelle, gets the nutrition that it requires. So, the next is wrong button. There we go. The next is research, and this can be research that's happening within the zoo or research happening outside of the zoo, but being sponsored by the zoo. The St. Louis Zoo is a leader among AZA zoos. So AZA is the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. It's basically the organization in America for zoos and aquariums. So the St. Louis Zoo sponsors various studies on reproduction, conservation, medicine, and species survival around the globe. This is actually one of the hellbenders that I was talking about earlier. So this is research that's happening within the St. Louis Zoo. This is research that's happening with one of our wild care institutes somewhere in Africa. I'm not exactly sure on the precise location. And this is research being done on an alligator snapping turtle in kind of my backyard of Missouri. So St. Louis Zoo is all over the place. It has 12 different institutions within the Wild Care Institute, which is associated with this, as well as the hellbender here. So aside from research is recreation. And this is what the everyday person thinks of when they think of a zoo. They think it's a zoo, it's a place to go have fun, which it is, to be honest, but it's so much more. There's so much more that goes into a zoo. Zoos are designed in a fashion that allows visitors to enjoy themselves, but while still also learning something. And they often don't even realize it until they get home and they're like, oh hey, that was something new, I enjoyed that. And finally there's all the recreation stuff. Finally, there's education. And the zoo does this both formally through classes, camps, and tours, but also informally through keeper chats, signage. This is a show that we have. Our sea lion is teaching the audience how to recycle. And we also have learned that just the sheer observation of animals is extremely influential in getting people to care about animals and do something after they leave the zoo. We found that especially eye contact makes a huge difference. If a visitor has eye contact with an animal, that makes a huge impact on that person. So in this way, every single species in any zoo is an ambassador for its own species. So I'd like to point out that it's taken over 100 years for the zoo to mature to this point, though it continues to improve every day. But from the very beginning, the St. Louis Zoo, or the St. Louis community, has been involved. So the zoo's first elephant, Miss Jim, she was purchased by the St. Louis school children through a penny drive in the early 1900s. And I believe much of the zoo's success and character is because of these deep roots it has within the St. Louis community. Now, aside from that, communities can have a huge impact on the next step for zoos. It was actually people that were concerned for the well-being of captive animals that made the standardization of animal welfare possible in the United States. And this didn't actually happen until 1971. And then the first AZA, the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, the first AZA accreditation wasn't until 1974. And then it took another 11 years for accreditation to be mandatory for membership to AZA. So this is the accreditation that Dr. Imran was talking about. It's quite a lengthy procedure that I'm not going to get too much into the details because we could go on for days. But it's basically, there's a very long application. There's a committee that's formed, inspection that comes to the zoo and inspects everything. These are just some of the things they inspect. So we get to safety, we have conservation and research, and basically everything. The vets, it interviews keepers and other staff members. And after the inspection, then there's an interview and the committee decides whether to accredit that institution or not. And once an institution is accredited, then in order to keep that accreditation, it has to go through this process every 5 years in its entirety. So that's a quick little introduction to AZA accreditation. And that's how our quality is maintained in the United States. But can it be done in Pakistan? I just have a brief little slide here because I'm obviously not an expert on Pakistani zoos. And I also want to leave you on a positive note. So the state of zoos in Pakistan, zoos and wildlife parks in Pakistan may be looking a little grim at the moment, with animal welfare seemingly on the decline, dilapidated habitats, and staff without the requisite knowledge of animal behavior. But look at what's being accomplished. So the recent court case brought by Dr. Tahir highlights the fact that people are taking notice of these unacceptable conditions. And remember, that's what happened in the States. It took the people to get accreditation to be standardized. So I've mentioned specific dates and timelines within the presentation to emphasize that getting a standardized system takes a lot of time. So it's not going to happen very quickly, but as long as there's people who are willing to do this, it can happen. If you look at Kavan, I'm sorry if I'm saying his name incorrectly, but he has been an issue in the Islamabad Zoo for years. And you never know, this might be the time that something is actually done for him and he is, put in a better place. And the bear as well. I'm not sure the bear's name, or if it has one. But I think that this is a great time for us as a community to come together and rebrand the Islamabad Zoo as one of quality and one that holds the animal welfare to the utmost importance. The last thing I want to say, and it's very important for every individual here, is the everyday citizen should never forget the power that we have in making a difference for those that cannot speak for themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie, for this wonderful overview of the St. Louis Zoo, as well as finishing on a very optimistic note, highlighting the role of individuals in changing the status quo. So let's, moving on from where Katie left, we'll move to Dr. Nadim Ahmed and his court case that Katie just mentioned. But before that, let me just give you a brief bio on Dr. Tar, who is the Executive Director of the Center for Culture and Development, a research policy and advocacy organization in Islamabad. He has served as Director, National College of Arts, Rawalpindi campus. He holds a PhD in art history and theory from the University of New South Wales and has served as postdoc researcher at School of Oriental and African Studies and at the MIT. So thank you very much, Dr. Tara, for being here. As an anthropologist, what made you interested in the welfare of the animals? If you can talk a little bit about that, and then follow that up by talking about and giving us a history about the court case that you were able to bring together. Thank you.
Thank you, Imran, for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts and experiences about animal welfare in Pakistan. Animals, as we can imagine, are part of the human habitat. So, I don't see any reason why human beings should not be interested in the welfare of the animals, as they are interested in the welfare of fellow human beings. So I think the same humanity has to be extended and not to be reserved for the human species, but all other species that inhabit this planet. And that has been my fundamental motivation. Adding on to that, I hope you would remember that there is an Animal Rights Day also coming up in October. And year after year, I sort of contribute articles on that day for the general awareness of the public, but that remained almost kind of a lone voice. I think, I sometimes think that it is comparable to the days of the imperialism, when it was thought that the black people have no soul. So if they have no soul, they have no right. It is almost comparable that we project these thoughts to the animals, that animals have no soul. Animals do not suffer. Animals do not undergo pain of separation or when they are being killed. But if you look, this much close at the animal, on our Eid days, when we mass slaughter animals as a sacrificial rite, okay? So you can always see what's going on with the animal. So it's being Muslim is an everyday experience almost for us from our very early ages. So I think so we have to really educate ourselves, and as well as our sort of younger generation, that yes, we are on the top of the food chain, and we have to sort of sacrifice or slaughter animals in order for us to live. They are a source of proteins and nourishment and all of that. But at the same time, we should not treat them as objects. This objectification of animals is a very troubling, I would say, sort of a thought, that you just objectify them as a thing to be consumed, not as a being to be taken care of, to be heard to listen to empathize for that matter. And sadly, these zoos, which were almost kind of intended to serve that purpose of creating empathy with the animal, has actually become the sites of crucifixion. As somebody said that, zoos are the places where all inmates, zoos are prisons where all inmates are innocent. So think about that. So I think, matlab, it's almost, visiting a zoo is a perverse experience. To be honest with you, it's like, in the old days, uh, there were human exhibits in the days of the colonial, let's say British colonial empire. In the imperial exhibition, they were human objects from Africa, from India, or artisans who were undergoing the labor, the sort of like as a performing exhibits. So I think this particular status that we are accorded to the animals in the zoo as exhibits, as living exhibits of a certain species, I think this is little troubling for me. We can be insensitive to any amount of pain by another human being or by animal. But if we sort of, kind of sit back and realize, "Ki, yaar, what are we doing?" I mean, the things that we constantly take for granted. I mean, you have seen the mass sort of a denial of animal rights. I mean, and even one of the experts who was talking to from WWF, who have helped us in the court, she said, "I'm not in favor of freeing the wild. I'm very much in favor of keeping the zoo." So I think there is a general sort of a public perception that animals are good for food, good to be consumed as objects. So that is that is very even sort of holds quite a bit of currency among the experts who deal with the animal welfare. In any case, now getting quickly to this court case, this court case has actually primary objective of this litigation has been to get the management of zoo transferred to the Islamabad Wildlife Management Board. Uh, if I'm not wrong, if I'm not mistaken, all other zoos like Lahore Zoo is under the Wildlife Department. Okay? They are not under the LDA or this, Karachi wala hai. अच्छा अब ये है कि because it's an older sort of establishment, as we know it came about in the British period, so they had sort of set the sort of institutional framework in which zoo is to be placed. But this zoo in Islamabad has never been part of the master plan of the city. It was, I think, a sanctuary for the birds of or the animals of the Magla Hills. It was never meant to be a zoo. Now, barring this side of the animal welfare of this, the question of the animal rights, as far as zoos are concerned, I will also quickly point out that these, when people say or the managers say that zoo is not, animals are not being kept because they have little funds, I think this is a huge understatement or a blatant lie. As far as I can tell, I mean, from the records provided to the court by the Islamabad Zoo, they have this contract for I guess 2.5 million or something on annual contract. See? Now the contractor who is actually taking the gate money and also then managing all those subcontracts for these little sort of for the vendors, for the food vendors, there are loads of them. I think they refuse to submit the actual number of visitors per year. So what I'm saying is it's simple arithmetic. Let's say that 2.5 million is the contract, and if you multiply with the number, I think there are millions of people who visit zoo. On any given day, especially even visit zoo today or we were there yesterday, we realized there were like sort of truckload of people coming in. People were coming in groups, So there are hundreds and thousands of people coming in. Where does the money is going? Money is being siphoned off. That is why I think this entire struggle for the jurisdiction that has landed in the court is not because that they love animals or they want to, sort of keep it away. It's because the money that is being siphoned off. Right? And this also means that if its jurisdiction is transferred to the Wildlife Management Board and they are transparent in their accounting, right? Zoo do not need any more funding from the government. I can assure you it can be put on a self-support basis. right? So money is never the problem. So we don't have to, think that because of the financial constraints of our public sector, thereby the zoos are being inefficiently managed. Now the inefficiency draws from the general malaise of the bureaucracy in Pakistan. I mean, if you have a director and a deputy director and office superintendent, all of those guys, what do you think? What kind of experts they are? They are being transferred left, right, and center. So anybody who has a degree in zoology will be put as for that matter, zookeeper by the MCI, right? So what I'm saying is this zoo, particularly Islamabad Zoo, Markazar Zoo, has never been planned. So the entire management structure is haphazard. Because it was unlike Lahore Zoo, Lahore Zoo had all the, I would say, the necessary constitution and the framework and the rules and the procedures and so on and so forth. If you look at the management of this Maghra Zoo, you will find none of these. Now, it was with the CDA, and when this MCI was created, it was just exchange hands. Nothing changed on the ground. Now, it is being expected that if finally this comes to the Islamabad Wildlife Management Board, Wildlife Management Board will run it better. It is an assumption. I, as a citizen, have little faith, to be honest, on the government, because it's a very sort of, for a variety of reasons, I think the citizens' involvement in the management of the zoo will resolve part of the problem, a whole lot of the problems, largely because it's a huge oversight. I mean, nobody realizes what's happening there. Nobody has control over. If there's a no complaint box, if I want to register a complaint, what do I do? Nothing. I mean, I was sort of moving around the cages, and there was a steppe eagle which had broken wings, and the wingspan is around like 7-8 feet or something, and it was limping in that little cage which was meant for kites, right? And there was two visitors apparently from a small town, and when they realized that I'm taking some interest, they said, "Oh sir, look at the miserable condition of this bird. There's nothing that we can do." Every visitor, that you come across, if you talk to them, they will actually share their anguish with you. Everybody could see that this zoo animals in the zoo are kept in a miserable condition, but you do not have a voice. How to express it? It's like any other public sector venture where you have issues and you don't know the redressal mechanism. So one thing that now we have now working with the Islamabad Wildlife Management Board and hoping that it will come through to them, we really urge them that to have a citizen liaison committee. For instance, you can have, adopt an animal. Just adopt an animal, a monkey, a bird, whatever, and you just take pictures and you are formally registered that you are actually, you have adopted this. And that reminds me that one of the American pop singer has adopted Coven, and she had made several requests through her sort of aides who had come to Pakistan that they are willing to invest money to restore the entire zoo if Coven is allowed to sort of send out to some sanctuary in Cambodia. But despite the negotiation with the higher sort of levels with the government, it has not come through. Now, this particular issue that part of us, or some of us really want that some animals have to be transported from the zoo to the sanctuary because the zoo do not or cannot provide a natural habitat for them. Okay. And that includes that bear as well, that includes this elephant as well, that includes a crocodile, that includes a steppe eagle. Now, while we were having a brainstorming session with the management of Islamabad Wildlife Board, who are very keen to improve the condition, they were adamant on this, that animals will not be taken out of the zoo. Now, to be honest, in my heart, I hope it should be otherwise, and it will be otherwise. But I have this feeling that not much will change with the change in administration. Yes, because the fundamental approach and policy towards animal welfare is completely, you know, sort of required rethinking. I mean, the kind of what policies that we have, there's no discussion. I mean, I have loads of these animal rights laws with me. I mean, if you need to get a license in order to have a dog in your house in Islamabad. Some of you might have a dog. Nobody would have sought license. So the compliance of whatever laws we have is extremely weak. And the approach that we currently have is very dated. There is no concept of animal rights in this country. So we have to, through, I would say, citizen engagement, we will have to raise these issues at a public level, educate people, inform people. I am moving towards actually creating an engagement at this Marghazar Zoo, where I intend to talk to the visitors about their experience, give them a little questionnaire to fill if they can, be part of this drive for the animal welfare. So if such campaigns are not launched, these seminars and discussion and the brainstorming sessions will not go very far in actually establishing this notion that animals have soul, animals have right, animals are, we share the planet with them. We are not the exclusive sort of monster in this world. So that is the my sort of raw feelings that I've shared with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saab. Very pertinent and very informative vis-a-vis whatever is happening with the court case and where we stand in terms of the management and some of the lacunas that are coming in as a hindrance towards moving towards a sustainable solution. So I think this is the picture. That's the picture behind. That's of Kavan. We took this on Friday, and Kavan is he's standing. He was brought in from Sri Lanka. So it's not a native animal to Pakistan, and it's standing in a concrete structure. And the area that he's living in is not much bigger than perhaps the area of this building, which is nothing. I mean, elephants are known to travel 30, 40, 50 miles a day. They're definitely walking 5 to 10 miles a day, even if they've got food. So here we've restricted them. My understanding is that the animal, they've also been chained because sometimes they act in an aggressive manner because of the psychological problems they face. So here he was standing in that concrete structure, and in the video you saw, he was moving his head, shaking his head back and forth. And some people might think that he's happy, but he's not. This is an example of what happens when an animal has been psychologically damaged. And so hence the request by a lot of people, a lot of foreigners as well, to move Kavan to perhaps Cambodia or to any other wildlife sanctuary where he can be taken care of. This is not a problem for Pakistan only. For example, I know that in the US, where the zoos are in much better shape, a lot of zoos have put their elephants into sanctuaries within the United States, because no matter how large of an area a particular zoo might allocate to an elephant, it's not enough. It's a huge animal that you can't be. Plus, the second thing is, elephants, just like humans, need company. You can't put one single animal in one particular cage and think that because we are feeding him and he's got some kind of cover when it's raining, that he's going to be fine. They've got families and connections. They're social animals. So this is what we really need to understand. I'm now going to move to Dr. Ijaz Ahmed, who's been patiently waiting and to talk. I think he had a presentation, but he'll quickly go over some of the larger issues in Pakistan, as well as the information as to the number of zoos in Pakistan and what can be done. So, but before that, let me quickly give you a brief overview of experience. Dr. Ijaz Ahmed retired from WWF Pakistan as Deputy Director General after serving the organization for over 2 decades. He holds a PhD in wildlife biology from Colorado State University and an MPhil in plant physiology from Qaid-e-Azam. He's a member of several international organizations and councils working on the environment. So, Dr. Saab, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank SDPI for thinking about such an important aspect related to humanity. I would say being part of the human culture, and as Dr. Imran earlier said, my previous organization WWF believes in basically protecting, conserving species, animals, whether they are birds, reptiles, etc., in their natural habitat. So we focus more on the in situ conservation, and we feel that if we protect habitats, we are protecting the sort of like web of biodiversity or web of life, and where the animals and the associated diversity, associated biodiversity, they get benefit from each other. But we also feel that zoos and wildlife parks, etc., they play a very important role in conservation. As a gene bank, I'll give you one example of one of the latest extinctions that we had in Pakistan. Gavial, घड़ियाल we used to जिसको कहते हैं. So there were like 4 animals in Pakistan, 3 female and 1 male. One male was found in Lahore, Lahore Zoo, and 3 females in Karachi Zoo. So we have been actually, I was at that time based at Karachi, and we've been talking to the zoo management in Karachi. The zoo was under KDA, Karachi Development Authority, and there was many political issues. But anyway, so we tried to convince, but it was very, very difficult to convince them to actually have some zoo exchange. Maybe get Gavial and in return give something else. And it did not happen. But then somehow I moved from Karachi. Then I was told that the 3 female Gavial were shifted to Lahore Zoo, and after a month or so, male died. And वो या तो खुशी से मर गया कि 3 फीमेल को इतने से बाद जो है उन्होंने देखा. Or I think it was not a wise decision, because if they transfer 1 female to 1 zoo and see what is the reaction and how things go on, and then ultimately think about just managing the other animals as well. So that is so now we don't have any Gavial in Pakistan. We have, I think, 1 female left, but the natural population of Pakistan has gone extinct, unfortunately. These zoos and wildlife parks, they play a very important role in such situation where we feel that ex situ conservation is important, and where some of the species can be protected. A gene bank can be protected by conserving species. And I think when we talk about the situation in Pakistan, normally we have more zoos in Punjab, and there are very few. We don't have any zoo in Balochistan. There was one small setup where they have cages but no animal, no bird. So similarly in northern areas, in Naltar there was a rescue center for snow leopard, but we don't have any zoo. In AJK there are 2-3 zoos, but they are in the development phase. Similarly, we have I think there are 2 in Sindh, 1 safari park in Karachi, and 1 zoo in Karachi, and 1 in Hyderabad. Similarly, in KP, there is 1 zoo in Peshawar, and there are few breeding centers. But in Punjab, we have three zoos, one in Lahore and then another in Bahawalpur, which was actually, uh, I think, more than a century old at the time of Abbasi दौर था जो उस दौरान. Similarly, we have one in DG Khan. But there are many wildlife parks. There are about 16 wildlife parks in Punjab, and and then there are, as we just found out, that there are private zoos as well in Punjab. And similarly, there are some private game reserves in Sindh as well as in Punjab, where some of the important species are kept, and then Nawabs or Vaderas, they invite their friends for hunting, for example, black buck or chinkara or a few other species. But the other associated biodiversity is also there, and they are protected from general public, I would say. So the pressure are not that high. In one way, it's a much better area as far as protection is concerned. There is a saying कि अल्लाह ताला जब परिंदों को और जानवरों को पसंद करता है तो उनके लिए दरख्त और आसमान बनाया अल्लाह ने, और इंसान जब किसी चीज़ को पसंद करता है तो उसके लिए वो केज बना लेता है. तो यही चीज़ जो है वो अनफॉर्चुनेट है कि अल्लाह करे कि इंसान को चीज़ें पसंद ही ना आए, क्योंकि वो फिर दे एक्चुअली put some sort of borders or cages for birds or for animals or whatever they like. And when we talk about any species, we were talking about elephant, kavan, and similarly, same thing happened in Karachi as well few years back, Susie. So we actually restrict them. I mean, like species which is fond of or used to just travel miles and miles and miles and interact with their own friends in the language that they understand with each other. And here it's like so it's just in isolation, kept there, and he or she cannot eat what they want when they want. So they are given water at the will of us. Not if they are thirsty, they cannot drink. I mean, like, so these are some of the things which actually disturb, depress, and ultimately they react. And this movement of Kavan is basically a situation which shows that the animal is under stress. So that is why, and the stress is very, very obvious, because we have not given him the shelter, we have not given him the proper food, proper a way to move around. So ultimately either it can tolerate or then it has to react. So ultimately it is reacting in such a way that it is depressed animal. And I think we heard about how St. Louis Zoo is managing the animal and also the visitors, because I think that is also very important. We have seen that in Lahore Zoo, although Lahore Zoo is the best zoo in Pakistan, I remember about 20 years ago, WWF hired a person, Dr. Usman Khan, who was the environmental education officer, and she was actually conducting all the visitation for the groups of students, and telling about the species and their role in the ecosystem, etc. So that played very important actually role by bringing together the visitors, because visitors, they play a very important role. And in Lahore we have seen deaths of zebras, giraffes, and few deer species by eating plastic bags. And these plastic bags were actually thrown by somebody will eat something and then they will just throw it in the cage, and they will eat, and ultimately over a period of time the animal will die. and when they do autopsy, so then they realize that it is because of this species. So I think one of the important factor is related to the visitor, how visitor treat these animals, and how they behave when they enter into zoo. If they will throw stone on monkey, if they will throw like whatever they have on any species, ultimately it is going to make a problem, put the animal in stress again, and because they cannot do anything. Another aspect which is very important, and I feel you have also mentioned, there is no activity for animals. They are just sitting there. They are not doing anything. There is no game, no nothing to play with. They just like मेरी तरह रिटायर आदमियों की तरह बस बैठे हुए हैं सोच रहे हैं क्या करना है. So ultimately, I think it is very important, and we tried to do some activities, and we in Karachi to engage animals and do some activities, maybe throw some football or something like that. But zoo management was not very keen to do that. So it was, again, I think it is very important to make the understanding of the people who are managing the zoo, or who are in charge of certain cages, or looking after the animals. These games they play, they make the animals active, less diseases to animals, healthy life, and then food also, like food intake is normal. So another aspect which is again very important is related to food. What kind of food you are providing them, and how often, how regular this food is provided. In Lahore Zoo, there was the director in charge of the zoo changed, and in 1.5 to 2 years time, almost every animal had a bigger clutch size, better breeding, just because of change of one director. And it was because of the food that director was getting, was provided to all to the animals only, not going into the director's boss's places or whatever. So that is also very important, because if you are eating the food of animal, so ultimately you will grow, not the animals. So that, like these are very small things, but these things, they reflect on the behavior, on the overall psychology of the animals. Dr. Imran mentioned about some of the private zoos. There are more than 100 animal they call it breeding center or something like that in Punjab, and I think 103 or 104, and most of them also have these ferrets, like cat species, big cat species, puma, lion, cheetah, etc. But then there was a very detailed guidelines which were developed by WWF in consultation with all the provincial government wildlife departments, and then it was actually shared by the CITES Management Authority, which is part of the Ministry of Climate Change, and these guidelines were then agreed by all the provincial governments. So now these guidelines are available, which actually mention about the size of the cage, about the facilities, about the veterinary facilities that should be provided to the animal which is kept, the overall animal husbandry, the record. I think that is also very important, having the record of all the animals, their daily consumption, what they are eating, what they are not eating, their daily activity. Unless we don't have this whole detail, we will not be able to find out whether this animal is in a healthy condition, or is suffering from some ailment. There are, I think, the important thing, unfortunately here we don't have, as you mentioned, when we talk about Islamabad Zoo, I think most probably Lahore Zoo has better animal caring facility. They are in the process of establishing ICUs. They are in the process of having a medical veterinary facility at the Lahore Zoo, which I talked to the director Lahore Zoo, and he mentioned that he'll share pictures with me, but he has not actually shared. I'll share it with you, and then maybe you can send it to all those who are present here about the facilities that they are establishing. So generally, I think once we also have, like we follow each other. Maybe if we get some good facility in Lahore Zoo, hopefully we'll have the same situation in other zoos as well, because there is a pressure from media now. The number of news that you get in newspaper, in channels, has increased over a period of time about the condition of animal, how animals are being kept, whether they are kept in the zoo or in the public zoo or private zoo. Another aspect, I think, to engage public is to celebrate important days. There was like Pangolin Day. Similarly, there are Chimpanzee Days. There are Porcupine Day. So these days, I remember that we used to have birthday, Susie's birthday in Karachi Zoo. We used to have a big cake and then just have some kids. So that actually provides an opportunity to educate people, to tell people about the importance of that particular species in the whole ecosystem and the role that they can play. And then ultimately, I think children can teach their parents also. So that helps a lot. So these are activities which they have to design for the whole year and engage public. Similarly, as you mentioned about the adoption. In Lahore Zoo, there was animal adoption program, and most of the animals, including ducks, were adopted by the public, by some of the corporate sector. So I think similarly we can actually develop this program, and these programs are developed, as you mentioned, once the zoo management has open thinking. They don't have limited thoughts. So I will just close, and maybe we can have a discussion here and then see if there is anything that, thank you very much for
Thank you, Dr. Saab. I think it's been a very engaging discussion, and I'm glad that we are starting off this dialogue on zoos. It's been going on, but we wanted to bring it into the public purview and hope to continue with these discussions. Talking about changes and behavioral changes, there's a lot of discussion on plastics. You mentioned the plastic bags. So what we did, this is the first time that we put in these steel bottles here for the participants. Yeah. So prior to that, we used to have those throwaway single-use plastic bottles. Even while we were talking against the plastics, we had them here. So this is the first time we've done it. You can see some plastic bottles in the back, but hopefully they'll go away too. So this is just one way of showing that we are taking small steps, and I think when it comes to zoos, we can do that collectively too.